Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Anya here with me today. Thank you so much for joining me today, Anya. Anya is a doula in Houston, Texas, and I'm sure you have many more things that you can share with us about who you are and what you do. So I'll just let you go ahead and do that. Please introduce yourself, share more about your work, and share with us what womb-centered healing means to you.
Okay. Thank you, Sama, for having me. My name is Anya, and I'm known, or my handles online and on social media is Anya Doula. I am from Houston, Texas, and it's my favorite city in the world. So this is home, and I've been I was an Army brat, and I'm an Army veteran, and so I've traveled so many different places. And Houston is what finally feels like home to me. So I love it here. So I have been a doula for almost a year, since last March. And I completed my training with Shafia Monroe Consulting.
Yes. Yeah. I know Shafia.
Yeah. And so, that was just a wonderful experience. I began my doula business in June of 2018. And I just kind of did I made a website, made a couple of social media pages, Instagram and Facebook. And I really wasn't expecting things to move as fast as they did. I'm pleased that they did, but I thought I would just put it out there, Anya Doula, and I'm in Houston, and anyone looking. And I thought maybe I'd have, one or two clients by the end of the year. And so far, let's see, baby number 9 was born on Tuesday or Wednesday morning, actually, Wednesday morning.
So wait a second. You put it out there when in 2018? June of 2018. It's been 6, 7, 8 months, and you've assisted at 9 births.
I have, yes.
Amazing. So
it's been the most wonderful journey, to get this started, and I think what I really like most about, or I don't know if you can say what you like most, but what I'm finding to be most exciting right now is just that it's this new relationship that I've never had, right? To come into that there are people who invite me into their family, into their home space, into, that very intimate, it's a vulnerable time, a major life transition, and that they trust me to be there to guide them and to support them. And so I'm just really enjoying that as this new type of relationship.
Wow. So the focus so far of your doula business has been with birth doula services.
Right.
Did you also do any of the training for postpartum?
I did.
Doula services. Have any of your clients enlisted you for postpartum support as well?
Not yet. So what I offer at the moment is birth doula services, and I also go and visit them for 2 postpartum visits. But that's more just it gives them a chance to download the birth experience, what I call downloading the birth experience, where we just go over it so that, we can reflect, appreciate what happened, or if there's anything that didn't go to plan, or, that was upsetting or frightening or whatever, we just get to talk it out and work it out. And it's really about, so I'll go back for a second. I am a nurse. I'm an LVN. And I worked in OBGYN for almost 13, 14 years.
So it wasn't that big of a stretch to then go in. Gotcha. Okay.
No. And so a lot of my job, I worked on the prenatal side. So I worked in prenatal care. taking care of women in the clinic that would come in for their prenatal visits with the doctors that I worked with. But I did a lot of telephone triage. So just, talking moms through the questions that they have. And anytime there were problems, it was my job to figure out, do they need to come in? Is this something that I can talk them through at home, or, give them whatever the doctors would want to prescribe, or do we need to send them into the hospital? So that's what my background has been, in a clinical setting. And so with the 2 postpartum visits, I'm also just looking and listening for any signs of any complications, right? Or I'm that extra set of eyes, because if a woman has a normal vaginal delivery at a hospital, she does not have to see her doctor again, or she won't see her doctor again until she's 6 weeks postpartum. However, there are so many things that can go wrong postpartum, and especially in the first couple of weeks, as opposed to, and so a lot of times what I found in the clinical setting is that those were the majority of the phone calls that I would get those first few days, once they've been home and things are a little bit hazy and foggy from the hospital. There's just so much that happened and they can't remember the instructions, or maybe they weren't given good instructions, just depending on who the staff is. And so they would call during that time. And so I wanted to offer that service in a more personal setting and actually go to the home so that I can put eyes on my clients and hear them talk and, be in the home, their partner is there, and we can all I just put a what I call my clinical eyes on them and clinical ears. And if there's anything that seems, out of the ordinary or alarming, then I'm right there and we can refer or do what needs to be done.
Wow. So it sounds like you got to a point in your nursing that you wanted to offer more support to the women that was sort of outside of the normal nursing scope of practice. And you saw that becoming a doula, you could make those home visits. You could.
Not quite. So I had a little bit of a break. So I stopped nursing in 2016. Burnout, a little bit of burnout, a little bit of just tired of the medical system. Not tired, fed up with the medical system.
What were you fed up about it with? What about it were you fed up with?
The bureaucracy of it, that doctors and nurses who want to provide a high level of quality care are a lot of times stopped by whether it's administration, whether it's insurance companies. I felt like there was a lot of space or a lot of hands in between, and things that would hinder care, right? Or hinder the quality of care that practitioners would like to deliver for the business aspect of it. So a lot of that. Also,
and that was so strong and distressing to you that you just had to leave. And
also just this is the first time I'm talking about this actually, and also just the mistreatment of there's a lot of abuse that happens in the medical community. And so whether that's physician to nurse or patients to medical staff, medical staff to patients, definitely. I mean, it happens. And so
how do you define abuse?
Abuse as in abuse of power, that.
Can you give a sample scenario just so that we can, it doesn't have to be something that actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's your typical, if you watch television, the whole scenario of the doctor berating nurses or doctors berating, interns in front of a room full of people or in front of patients, or nurses who do that to one another, superior nurses to, brand new nurses who come in. And so rather than it being this space of caring and nurturing, which is what, if we all would think that healing is about or is supposed to be, but it's just there's a lot of abuse of power that happens. There are a lot of power play dynamics that take place that after a while I just decided it didn't align with where I want to be and the kind of caregiver that I would like to be. And so I stopped working as a nurse. Well, I was a nurse manager in 2016. And so I stopped working and I just needed to take a break. And so I started teaching high school, and I teach health science technology. So I teach the children who want to become health professionals when they get older. So I taught a clinical rotation class where I take them to the hospital and they get to, job shadow.
Wow.
Practitioners. And yeah, and it's really fun. This is my third year teaching, and it's really been a good time. But last year I found myself really kind of aching to take care of women again. And yeah, that's the best way I can describe it, was just this ache and this kind of yearn to get back. But I know that I don't want to go back to the medical field. And so I was just kind of, floating around the internet one night and then I was aware of doulas from when I was pregnant with my son, but I kind of knew about it from a television show, didn't look into it too much. I was very much medically trained and on the straight and narrow, you become a nurse and then an administrator and you retire.
Yeah.
And that's the track that I was on. And so once I came across what doulas do, and then I'd always only known about nurse midwives that work in hospital systems and that are trained through universities. And I didn't realize that there were certified professional midwives. And so I started looking up that information and researching, and then I found myself at Shafia Monroe's.
So I imagine going to Shafia Monroe's school, isn't she in Washington or Oregon or something?
She's in Portland, Oregon. And okay. I did travel there, although she hosts trainings throughout the U.S.
Okay. But you did go to an in-person component of your training. And I imagine that was mind-blowing for you, just learning about all these different perspectives.
It was.
I'd love for you to share about that. What was the most wow moment? Why didn't I know this?
So I'll tell you, the first thing, just what was wow to me, was that, I went, like I said, I stopped working in 2016. So now this is 2018 that I'm going to doula training. And when I left when I left practicing as a nurse, I left it, I left it. I took a summer off. I started teaching high school, and I haven't really, hadn't gone back to it at all. And so I was a little bit anxious about going to the training because I wasn't sure in two ways. I wasn't sure if this was really going to be right for me because I do come from a medical background. And so I questioned a little bit whether I could make that switch. That's how I saw it in my head at the time. And then I also was just a little bit anxious about going back into that space. And it's just because the way I left wasn't very nice. And so, day one, just of meeting Shafia Monroe and being with all of my doula sisters that I trained with. There were 10 of us, I believe, that weekend, 10 or 11 of us that weekend. And it just was it was healing. It was immensely healing for me. It was, I just, it really kind of helped close out the muck that I left nursing with and opened up this brand new space for me. And I just saw it as like the beginning of a new journey, and I've been having a good time.
Wow. So it sounds like, and I mean, I know from my doula training, not with Shafia, but I've spoken with Shafia, and I'm pretty darn sure she's has this similar approach. Most doulas do, because of the meaning of the word doula, you know, a woman of service, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being in service to other women. There's a real sense of care and service and quality of care in the doula community, even to the extent of facilitating or helping to facilitate or, you know, sort of be an advocate, not really an advocate, but
I definitely see it as an advocate. Absolutely.
Okay. Advocate. Yeah. It's tricky because a doula's scope of practice, we have to be very careful around that, because there's a lot of animosity towards doulas, especially those who get all and sometimes rightly so, you know, upset at the medical profession for the abuse and accusatory around the abuse of power and the power dynamic that typically happens, where the doctors and the nurses are treating the woman who's birthing like she doesn't have any power.
Right.
And that they have all the power to make decisions, and they're going to do things to her and disregard her her autonomy, her right to make her own choices, because of this medical model of authority and that power dynamic you spoke about earlier. And so a lot of doulas have some doulas have made sort of a bad name for doulas.
Yeah.
But there's also this intrinsic authority of, oh, a doula doesn't have any authority here in the first place. So a lot of doulas have had to sort of insert themselves strongly in order to do their job, and even have permission to do their job. And so you're coming in from this other angle, and feeling the basic way that medical model is failing women and babies, and failing the birth process egregiously, so much so that you had to leave, and coming into the doula world where Shafia is like, we're going to do something different. We're going to really care. And all the other doulas, we're really going to care for women, and we're going to put ourselves in there, and we're going to take care of these women, whether they're in the hospital or home birth or whatever, and provide that holding of empowerment for the woman, that her body is the authority on what's happening, and the baby is the authority on what's happening, not the doctor, not even the midwife, not even the doula, and then remedying that power, that abusive power dynamic. So you went in there into this training, and it's like, I can just imagine a big sigh of relief.
I do want to say that, so I'm also careful to I don't want there to be an enemy on either side. And I say that because when I first started working in women's health, I was trained by two physicians who were just phenomenal women, and taught me so much. And so I was able to see physicians who, and I didn't know it at the time. It just, to me, it was what was normal, because it was what they were doing. But these were two women who absolutely cared and respected their patients. And then I moved to Houston, and I worked with another group of physicians who were, a great group of physicians. And one of them, who was the vice chair of our department, and I was the nurse assigned to her, we worked wonderfully together. But she, I regard her as my mentor, but she's who opened my eyes to understanding how I could look at the social aspect of women's healthcare. And she also helped me understand how to be a change agent, that when we see problems, we fix them, because our job is simply to take care of women. I mean, I'll give an example. I had a friend who was having a hard time at her doctor's office. Doctor just, didn't believe her, kind of just decided that she was making all these things up.
Yeah.
So I told her, or I talked to the doctor that I worked with, and I said, my friend is having a really hard time at her doctor's office. They don't believe her. They won't make an appointment for her. Can she just come and see you and just, I just wanted something different to happen for her because I knew she was really struggling.
Yeah.
And so the doctor said, yeah, absolutely. Ask her to come in early, and so we all got to work really early that morning. And my friend absolutely had a problem that the doctor saw right away. And she went ahead and took care of it right then and there. Just, it was done. It was such a simple issue that needed very little to be done, to be taken care of. And she did that for her. And I said, wow, I wasn't expecting you to do all of that. I wasn't, I mean, this is before the front desk comes in. So we didn't, we didn't bill, we didn't, and so I said, I thanked her and I said, I really wasn't expecting you to handle everything. I just wanted her to feel better and to get a good direction of what to do. And she turned around to me and she said, Anya, our job is to take care of women. Your friend had been through enough. So we took care of her. That's it.
So I can see where this burnout came from, because having mentors like that in the medical arena,
yes,
and then coming up time and again, like you said, of how the administration and the money making and the insurance and all of that might stop those kinds of mentors and
taking care of women, and then other times actually harms women. And that was what got tiring.
Right. So then, because then, I mean, you've got in the same system, you've got these people that are just in there plugging away with their seemingly tireless devotion to taking care of women within this system that seems to be set up to disregard and abuse women oftentimes, and not just women, but we're talking about
women, right?
and then you have the people that are just going right along with the most important thing is making money, and the most important thing is that I have my authoritarian status and prestige and power over the women that I'm caring for. And they may think that they're trying to care for women, but those are the ones that are then abusing women by not listening to them and all of this. So you've got this contrast between these two different types of practitioners. In your experience, what creates the one type of practitioner and what creates the other? I mean, how do we have these people that are willing to, go into the medical field against all odds and just care for women, despite the barriers and everything that gets in their way, versus the ones that are, all wrapped up in the authoritarian, make as much money as you can model? What creates one versus the other out of a young, medical professional? I mean, I imagine you must think about this when you're in there giving tours to these high school students. Can you tell which way they're going to go or where they're going to be on that spectrum? How do you encourage them down the road of devotion to caring?
So I think it's as diverse as people are. I don't know if that's me or if that's you. Are you hearing feedback? Diverse as people are, I believe that most people start out, when they're in high school. I look at my my babies who are in my classrooms, and they're so enthusiastic about healthcare, whether it's because they have family members who work in healthcare, a lot of them because they've experienced something personally, some sort of health emergency or health condition, or they've seen a family member, that they really love and care about. experience something and they want to be able to help their family and they want to be able to help themselves. So I believe that most people who go into the medical profession have that idea. I think what happens is some people they're not really caregivers. They are people who study well and go to school and make great grades, and they know that becoming a physician or becoming, working in the medical profession is financially a really good payoff. And so I think maybe that's some of it. I think some people, their parents or whomever in their lives pushes them into a profession that they may not really want to do. But they go with it. And so there's a lot of, I just think that there's so many different ways you can answer that. But I think that power, just that abuse of power, for one, it's intrinsic. It's the way that the medical system began. It's the way, it just, especially in women's health, we know obstetrics because of the work that was done on women who were enslaved. And so that is an abuse of power that still carries all the way through, or if you think back to the day when we believe that women who, what was I going to say? But anyhow, just, I believe that like the power itself, right? That we have this hierarchical system, and whoever's at the top has the most power, and those who are at the bottom have the least amount of power. And so it creates an imbalance that becomes more about the titles and the profession and the and how people choose to wield that power. Some people, like the physician that I was telling you about earlier, she used her power to go into the county hospital and make it as equitable to the private hospital that we worked at, because there was no reason for those women to not have the same amount. Like, they had the same amount of space, they had the same money to get the same type of equipment but that wasn't happening. And she asked me why I thought that wasn't happening. And I said, I thought maybe because, well, what she did is she took me to the maternity, the labor and delivery unit, to the postpartum unit, and showed me that the women were 2 to a room there, but half of that labor and delivery unit wasn't being used. When we went to the other side, the rooms were being used as storage. And she asked me, well, why do you think that we have the same amount of space, but we're putting women 2 to a room over here and not over at the hospital where you work? And I thought, funding or lack of something, or, these are women who are poor and indigent, or, have very little health care, if at all. And I just pulled out everything I could possibly think of. And she said, Anya, it's because they don't believe they deserve that much dignity.
Who doesn't believe? The women themselves or the staff?
The staff, the system, administration, the hospital. And so what she did was open the entire floor so that those women could go into a postpartum floor and not have to room with another woman in another family, so that they could have the same type of experience that any woman with insurance or any woman who can privately pay is going to have, and that you would have a room to yourself and you're not sharing a bathroom. I mean,
Yeah. So that you can have that kind of care, and that those women deserve that just as much as anyone else.
Absolutely.
So that doctor was able to just waltz in there and say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Did she run up against?
She absolutely did, but she's a whippersnapper. So
sounds like it.
But yeah, she ran up against the obstacles, and she, we live in Texas, and it's definitely, a good old boys club out here. But she's a tough one, and so she made things happen. Yeah.
you know what? That just makes me so happy to know that there's women like her and like yourself that are just seeing it how it is, and doing what you need to do to get the education and the support that you need to just go in there and make change happen, be change makers. So
Like to take care of women, that's it. It's that simple. And the system will complicates it plenty. But and that's how I see my work is my job is to take care of women. My job at the high school right now is to take care of the children who are there. Their mothers send them there. I mean, their fathers too, but their mothers send them there with the expectation that they're going to be taken care of throughout the day. They are going to learn, but they're to be taken care of. And so that's just like my philosophy is that I'm here to take care of people. Yeah.
What a different world it would be if we took care of the children growing up enough through our educational system that said, if we were able to have an educational system that fostered that caring for the child, for each developing adult, to really get in touch with their own skills and desires and inspiration about the kind of work that they might want to do. Because you were talking about how some of these people that are in the medical field that are perpetuating the abuses against women and other staff and other practitioners, that power dynamic that's so abusive, that domination dynamic that's being perpetuated often by people because they are dominated in some way by a system that says that they have to do this even though they don't love it. They can't live a life that they really love. They feel smooshed down by their obligations, and all they have to cling to is, well, I'll at least make a lot of money, and somehow, and so then that creates that money driven level of care and perpetuates that. And it's not care, really. It's, I'm going to do this because that's how I'm making money, without any real connection to heart or to anything that the person is very inspired about. And so they're often suffering inside secretly. And then the only way that they can feel good about themselves is to have power over other people somehow, and have, and it's not just healthcare practitioners or medical practitioners, it's everywhere that's how that kind of abuse, that kind of power dynamic gets perpetuated, is that people don't get to fully develop into who they are and what brings them joy and their own sense of inner power. They have to get power by having power over others. And so, and so this mutual empowerment in practitioners and in practices like doula services and different professions that are developing with, like, in midwifery, basic standards of care in midwifery is about a mutual empowerment that we're supporting women to have their own inner power, and taking a stand for that woman that we're caring for, her inner power, and not overpowering her with our expertise or our that. And so that becomes very revolutionary, because our whole societal foundation, like you were talking about, the foundations of modern day gynecology was based on horrible experimentation on enslaved women. And so our whole society is based on that, not just medical, but our whole economic system, our whole industrial system is based on
education, all of it. Yeah,
education. It's all based on the foundations of slavery, right, in this country. And it's just, we have to keep bringing our healing attention to that, because all of us, everyone suffers
Exactly.
terribly from that.
And then that's the thing that happens, is that when it's so embedded into, it's systemic, and it's so embedded into the culture. And so, it becomes, it's what's normal.
Mm-hmm.
And for people like myself who start to realize, it's normal, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
You know?
Right. And then, right.
Like, this is normal, but it doesn't have to be.
Uh-huh.
And I started to realize, at a certain point, that I was like, this is a system of abuse.
Mm.
And that if I were in a relationship like this, like a romantic relationship like this, I'd have gotten out a long time ago.
Mm.
Or if I were, in any type of any outs of friendship or whatever, that it's not something that I would tolerate. So I had to just question myself, like, why are you tolerating this? Like, what is your end goal? And so I had these dreams of becoming, moving up the ranks and becoming a hospital administrator at some point. And that was my goal. I was very career oriented and, like, climb the ladder and break a ceiling or two, and do all of those things. But it got to the point where I just felt worn down. And I felt worn down personally, but then I was also watching just this personally, professionally, but then I was also looking at it from the standpoint of the patients that we were taking care of. And I can we pause for a moment? I'm so sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So yes, in talking, just I was starting to feel worn down personally and professionally, but then I was also realizing what was happening to the women who were in our care at some of the practices that I worked at, and just, they just weren't being handled with caring hands, is the best way that I can say it. It just, so there is one day there was a woman, I told you I was the manager at this practice, and there was a woman who came in. She was brought to me. The nurse said, "We're going to bring you Miss So-and-so." And she had this reputation of being a troublesome patient, or, someone who was, she'd come in with these complaints and no one believed her complaints, and they'd examine her and nothing was there. And so they, it was like, here, you deal with her. You figure out how to get her to go away, basically, is how she was presented to me. And so this woman comes in and she's just like so red in the face, and she's crying and she's a bit hysterical. And it was a lot for me to just sit with her enough for her to calm herself down, and, offer her water. And so she finally got to a point where she could breathe and talk. And she said, I come in here because I know that something is wrong with me and I feel it, but it seems like every time I come, it's not there. And so the doctor doesn't believe that but it's a part of how long is it taking her to get an appointment. She calls, and can't get an appointment for 2 weeks. And so if you do have some sort of vaginal itch or what, it may clear up, because sometimes it does clear itself up, but whatever. So she's having this problem. She can't get in. And then when she does finally get in, then the problem's not there any longer. And so the doctor is telling her that nothing's wrong, but she knows that something is wrong and she doesn't know what to do. And she feels like she's going crazy, right? So you can see how she's just in this.
Well, there's so many women that feel that way, because a lot of women's issues are cyclical. They only come up at a certain time in the cycle. And having to, fit that into a medical facility's scheduling thing, it's just not going to happen. And most doctors just don't even have a sense of the cyclicalness of that aspect of women's health, because nobody's done research about that. In fact, women were deliberately excluded from research to avoid having to deal with that cyclicalness, because it kind of makes it difficult to do research. But hello, that means that all the protocols and all the treatments up until 1990 that were invented from the research that we've done have excluded women. But they're still given to women. The procedures and the protocols and the drugs are all still given to women, even though women were not involved. So, okay, you got me going.
And so right. But so I'm sitting there with her and I'm listening, and I probably sat with her for an hour, and most of it was just allowing her to say everything that she needed to say, because she had not been allowed to say the things that she needed to say. And then I also think that because when I was 19, I was in the Army, and like you said, cyclical, and also like related to what's happening in your emotional, social, mental world. So when I was 19, I was in the Army. I was, living in the barracks, eating food from the cafeteria when normally I would have been eating food, my dad's food at home. So I go from, like just this environment, like very high stress environment, but you're young, so you take it. You just, it is what it is. You're a recruit in the Army. But I started having this problem of, these constant recurrent vaginal infections. And I was going through the same thing, and I was going to Army hospitals because I was in the Army, and I had these male doctors who couldn't really care less about my vaginal problems every few weeks. And they did the same thing to me. And so I was able to, because, I don't know, well, I'll say this. I know that I would have at least listened to that woman, right? Whether I had gone through the situation myself, like she was going through, or not, I would have at least listened to her. But I could at least I could empathize with her even more and know for a fact that, believe her. I don't know. It's still something that boggles my mind that we don't believe someone who says that this is happening to them. And that just because you can't see it in the moment, and I just didn't understand how they weren't looking at, if she called 2 weeks ago and you can't fit her in until today, that issue might not be there the moment that you see it, and you're not going to catch it on your swab. And then she's going to be really upset about this, and it's going to spur the whole thing all over again. And so we've at least, and there are more tests. I can Google them and know that there are more tests. I mean, obviously I knew more than that, right? But anyone can Google and find out that there are more tests that can be done. So why you're stopping at this one point and not going further, or if you don't know what to do further, then refer her to the specialist who can. And so that's eventually, I just told her, here's where you go. Here's a doctor who's actually going to be able to help you, and so.
And it's so simple, and yet because of that pressure to always make money and to cut costs and also the workload that's often piled up on people, that's far beyond what I would consider to be ethical for those practitioners and healthcare providers, but also for anyone. I mean, and ethical in business practice too, the piling that much workload on people to whatever cut costs so that they can't really spend enough time with each patient to really figure out what's going on and have enough presence of mind and presence of being with that person to really take in. I mean, that's what it is. It's like, you got 10 minutes. They're saying, they're not even listening to the person, and they're just swabbing them and sending it to the lab, and then they're done and on to the next. And whatever the lab says, is what the lab says. You don't have anything, sorry. And then 2 weeks later, she's got it again, right? And so there's this, lack of attention to the fact that, I mean, when you look at medical training in general, like to become a doctor, the degree to which doctors have to neglect their own personal lifestyle and care in order to get their degree and to get all of their certifications and be approved to be a doctor. I mean, this whole norm of having doctors be on call for days on end and not getting any sleep, and like that is supposed to produce a good doctor, one who's sleep deprived and exhausted and delusional.
And then back to that whole power dynamic.
And then that's what exactly. Then they have to lean on having power. Well, you're going to do it this way because because I said so and I'm the doctor, instead of being rested enough and sane enough and having an ethical workload enough and having a life enough to be able to see themselves as a human being instead of something that's greater than human beings. Right. So the whole system is built on this house of cards that's just, I feel like.
And the other thing for physicians is the liability, the insurance, and so that's another thing that puts them into this spot where they have to, or they feel that they have to force a plan on their patients because they're doing all they can to avoid lawsuits and being in court and their license being stripped away from them. And so when we talk about that matter of choice, especially in obstetrics, when we're talking about women giving birth and the things that with the midwifery model of care, we don't see pregnancy as a problem. We know that this is a natural life event and we're going to treat it as such. But doctors don't really have that luxury.
I don't know if it's a luxury. I understand.
But they don't have the, because everything for them is like staying out of the courthouse. Everything for them is, what do I need to do to keep this person healthy, or at least not harm them or not cause an issue? And so then it becomes, well, you're going to have an induction at 39 weeks if you're 41 years old, because
the thing is, that's not based on the actual evidence of what actually keeps women healthy and not having.
Right. But they are doing what they think they need to do to avoid lawsuits. And so, and they don't want their insurance to go up. They don't want, and so it sticks them in this place. And that's what I mean, that I started to see, I was like, wow, women are they're not even being allowed to make choices. Like, choices are being made for them and they're not even aware that these choices are being made for them. And it was just this very strange place of I just had to get out.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, I've been following doulas online in this discussion for a long time. And one of the most exciting conversations that I witnessed recently was a woman saying she's becoming a lawyer doula. Oh. Because a lot of women, especially who have had a history of sexual abuse or assault, are very sensitive, and they're trauma, they're still in trauma recovery, but they're pregnant and they're wanting to give birth, and they need this type of trauma sensitive care practitioners. In that medical system where there's not clear consent about every single procedure that takes place, that feels like being assaulted once again to women, especially who have that history, but also to women who even don't have that history. But this woman brought her lawyer doula in to express to the medical staff and ensure that they respected this woman's need for physical space and for clear consent before any procedure was begun, before she was even touched, before her space was even entered into.
Right.
And that level of consent, attention to procedural consent and the potential for lawsuits against doctors who and other healthcare practitioners who are not attending to the need for consent in medical procedures, especially with birthing women, could potentially be a game changer. I think it is becoming a game changer, I hope, because women are starting to say, yes, their baby lived, yes, they lived, but
I'm traumatized.
they were traumatized, they were abused, they were not treated, given the right, their intrinsic right to have consent over what was happening for their body. And so
that's where I focus, with my doula practice. I primarily work with families who are planning a hospital birth. In fact, those are the only clients that have reached out to me so far, those who are planning a hospital birth, which is wonderful because that's, it's the world that I come from. Not that I won't assist if someone asked me to, be at their home birth with the midwife, I'd be happy to. But so that's who's finding me. And my intent in my practice is to provide the information and to be, for lack of a better term, like the medical translator, right? Because these are women who, so my client base so far has been women who are professional women. They are also mostly women of color or Black women. And so they already have, and it's cultural. We already have this mistrust a lot of times of the medical system. We also just, whether she's a teacher or an attorney or, but they don't have the knowledge base. And they know that they don't have that knowledge base going into this. A lot of them are first-time moms. And so they want to be assured that they have someone who's on their side, who's especially looking out for them, right? They trust their doctors. They don't not trust their doctors. They trust the doctor that they've hired. And so, but they just want to be sure that no one is pushing them into things. They want to be, and they're looking for the information. They're looking for that education. And so I spend a lot of time at the prenatal visits. We just go over, I'm still looking for a new term for birth plan because I don't, because I do, I'm a nursing background and I kind of do the big yawn at the 8-page, birth plan as well. It's a lot, it's a lot. But what I do for my clients is I do use the 8-page birth plan as an educational tool for my clients. And we go down because those birth plans really do cover every decision that will probably come up, for a family who's giving birth. And so, I use that, but then what I do is once we understand what their preferences are going to be, and once we understand what's most important to them, I condense that down into this nice little sizable letter that physicians are not going to balk at when they see, that the nurses will be happy to read. And they say, and my clients have come back and said, like, my doctor was really impressed with that.
Nice. That's a powerful service right there.
And we're doing that to bridge that gap that can happen, right? And so now my client is empowered because she knows exactly what she's talking about when she walks in with her birth plan. And then she's handing over this document to the medical staff, and they are happy to read it, because it's not 8 pages, right? And it highlights the things that are important for them. And we don't really need to know if she wants to be able to wear her fuzzy socks, like keep your fuzzy socks. But now we've got this 1-page letter that covers what's most important. And then they can start having a conversation, and a conversation that's respected on both sides.
Beautiful.
And it really just, I'm finding that. So what I've found with a few of my clients is that the doctor is even a little more willing to stretch further than they probably typically would go,
Mm-hmm.
because they know that their patient has solid information. And it's not just someone coming in and saying, well, my girlfriend did it this way. And, and some, we get out of all those fuzzy zones.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm finding that right now that's what's working. But my goal, I don't go into anyone else's birth space with my own agenda for their birth at all. I've had 2 children, and I was very happy with the births that I had. And I'm pleased. And so I don't need to push any way that I would do things on that family. My goal is to find out what they want for their birth experience. Mm-hmm. And then how do we do that with evidence-based care, and how do we communicate that to your physician so that they will also respect it?
Beautiful. What a strong bridge builder you are becoming. It just gives me great joy and hope for the women that you're serving, to get the quality of care that all birthing moms deserve. And so thank you so much for building those bridges, and for being that change maker, and for having such awesome mentors and listening to them. Such a pleasure to talk with you today. So Anya, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, learn more about your doula work, how would they do that?
So I'm on Facebook as Anya Doula, just Anya Doula. So
okay.
You spell Anya Anya, and then Doula Doula. I am on Instagram as Anya Doula HTX for Houston, Texas.
All right. Okay.
And I also have a website, anyadoula.com.
Beautiful. All right. So if you want to get in touch with Anya to learn more about her doula work, highly recommend it. Thank you for joining us on the Womb-Centered Healing podcast. That is a production of the Womb-Centered Healing Temple. We're having an upcoming online summit called the Embodied Shakti Summit. If you're interested in hearing more interviews like this about embodying our feminine creative power, then you can sign up at wombcenteredhealing.com for the upcoming summit and other upcoming Womb-Centered Healing Temple events. So thank you for joining us for the podcast. And wonderful. Thank you for being here with us, Anya. And hopefully we'll get to talk again soon. That's all for now.